We're back for another week of defense with DC, our defensive coordinator, Dan Carroll from the USFL Michigan Panthers. And this week, we're going to focus on an outstanding performance by the Middle Tennessee defense. We'll talk about last plays and the 2-minute drive. And, of course, we'll cover our weekly option tips. And, as always, joining me is Dan Carroll. Dan, great to have you back for another week.
Great to be here, Keith, man. Another great week of football. Can't wait to talk about it and get started with it.
So the game we're focused on this week is the performance by Scott Schaefer's defense at Middle Tennessee State, defeating Miami in a significant stat, holding them to 60 yards rushing on 38 attempts. I know you saw a lot that you liked from this performance when you went back and watched the game.
Yeah, one thing that I thought stood out is just how aggressive and vertical they played their D-line. I mean, they were playing a four-down front. They were in a lot of too high, a lot of quarters looks. You know, they did play a little bit of one high, and they had some other fires and stuff off of it. But a good bit of it was quarters and four-down defense, and just how fast and aggressive they were able to play. It seemed like this is something that's pretty common in four-down quarters, something, a strategy that I've used in the past and something that I'm familiar with. But playing the guys away from the back extremely fast and vertical, loosen their gap, fast and vertical up the field, really so the back doesn't feel like he has a bounce front side. Like we're dictating where the ball's going to go. And if you watch, they were able to do that quite often. No matter who the D tackle was away from the back, whether they had three set to the back based on where the tight end was, the nose was set to the back, whatever it was. Three was away, three was two. The D tackle on the, away from the back was able to get vertical and cut the field off multiple times. And, you could see a couple times that they were even playing a shade away from the back, which typically people play it too high if you're four down and you're playing kind of zone alignment rules. But they were playing a shade, and he was getting vertical, and the ball would jump cut right back in the backside A gap, and the Mike Packer sitting right there. So I think those are things you got to be able to do, especially when, maybe playing a team that's bigger than you, and you got to be able to use your speed. And if you can use your speed to dictate where the ball is going to go, it's always going to give you a good chance. And, the other thing I like about that is when you play this RPO world, play RPO and play action, you see these a lot. What happens a lot is if you play every block and everybody tries to play every block like a run block, you never get any pressure. And sometimes these RPO pass protection, it's like they might be there the quarterback might stand back there for 3 seconds if whatever RPO flows, because it allows you, when you play that aggressive against the run, it allows you to have the possibility of getting some pressure in the RPO game. So I think that it's a great strategy for four-down defense to, however you want to set it up, whether it's just the tackle away from the back or the end away from the back, whatever, but telling those guys, look, we're going to try to bottle the back up. We're going to try to cut the front off by pushing these guys through their gaps, and then we know where the ball is going to go in the run game, and then we're going to be able to get some pressure if it's RPO, if it's play action or something like that. So I thought they did a great job with that. Something that, again, I think all four-down defenses should look at and how they do it, because if everybody's playing run blocks and it turns into being RPO, the quarterback is not stressed at all. So and I want to make sure he's stressed when he's putting the ball in the air, because that's probably the fastest way we can get us one. So
when you look at running the ball, right, when I learned the zone run game, which is almost 2 decades ago now, one of the key things I learned from really all the guys was penetration kills the play. And, on zone plays, we're trying to get distortion. We much rather prefer that distortion be horizontal than somebody coming into our backfield. Now, there's ways to deal with that, but that's not ideal. You don't want guys in your backfield. And I think you bring up a great point, too, in that the RPO world, in a lot of ways, if you're not just letting somebody run off the edge, so you're solid blocking on an end that quarterback doesn't have to deal with him, that quarterback will have more time and he's better protected than the RPO. I can recall Dave Clawson talking at a clinic and showing their statistics and the change in where they went offensively when they went to this RPO offense. And that one of the points he brought up is, they didn't actually spend a whole lot of time on pass protecting because most of their plays came from this. Now, they run a very unique offense in the way that they slow mesh and the way that they play their offensive line and how it opens up things behind for them. But the point being, penetration now goes back into, one, cutting off running lanes, right? It's definitely gonna constrict the running area because that guy no longer really can get outside of that. But as you said, you have to be filling there too. So while you might say, well, it's gonna open up the opportunity for RPO, if you got that guy gap charging and he's getting into the backfield, that turns into a keep. I mean, that quarterback doesn't have a whole heck of a lot of time to get rid of the football.
Yeah, I agree. And one thing that you see, and I won't say lately, sometimes these years run together and it's been a lot longer than you think, but so much 4-by-1 zone that winds back, right? So I always wonder, like, the people that have been able to cut the field off on the opposite side of the back, has that created somewhat more of a veer path for the backs? You know, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but it's always been interesting because I've seen people have success of shooting the guys up the field away from the back, shoot them up the field, kind of bottle it up. But now if the offense is truly running almost like a veer path or a backside eight, a bounce backside path with the back, it doesn't really matter anymore, you know, from a run perspective.
Right. Well, you see teams running more versions of their zone that way, where it's a straight ahead downhill dive play. They're not looking to bounce that thing. They're not necessarily looking to cut it back very far. So they're specifically hitting there. Yeah, against those types, it becomes difficult. But if you're looking against teams that like to utilize the wide zone or mid zone, now it becomes a little different because on those plays, as I said, you're looking more for that horizontal distortion of the defense, and penetration is going to start to force decisions much quicker, and your back's got to be good at that. If you know you're a read pull, you got to be better at those kinds of things. So I mean, there's definitely something to be said as far as a strategy, but I think that's a good point that you bring up. You gotta watch. I mean, there's teams that are set up to handle those things very well.
So something else that plays off of this that you have to be careful of, and something I've been in this situation before, but when you play so vertical, typically when you're playing in a quarter structure, you want to spill gap schemes to get it out to the safety, right? Between the D end and the Mike, specifically Miami ran counter a few times, OY, right? The D end spills first one, Will spills the second one, safety makes the hit, right? Well, what can happen is when you're playing them so vertical is the D end ends up boxing the guard, right? The Mike spills the Y, and now the safety's got to fit inside, which is fine generally. The thing that Miami was being able to get, and again, I've ran this exact same situation before, is the safety, when he's got to fit inside, they generally feel like they got to come down quicker because the ball is not getting bounced laterally. It's getting hit vertical. So they come down quicker, and then it was opening the glance window to the X. So I know maybe this is a little bit contradictory, but when you're playing those guys vertical, when you're playing them upfield fast, you still got to be conscious to be able, if you've got counter sets or you got gap scheme sets that are going to come back there, okay, it's great change up to be able to have a way, maybe you pirate or you just chase the 5 technique down or however you do it, whatever your stunts are, and make sure that ball gets spilled out to the safety, because when it gets spilled out and you know that you're going to cancel the 2 gaps that are coming back with the counter and the safety, you can typically play it a little slower, hold the RPO window, and still make the tackle on the counter. So I think that's a game you always got to play with those guys, whether you're playing a dead quarter safety back there, or in this case, I believe Middle Tennessee was using the boundary safety on the tight end coming back. But either way, on that play, he's in the same fit, whether he was in a regular quarter or poaching 3. When the tight end come back, he's going to be in the same fit anyway. But he's in that conflict of hold the glance window, play the run. So how do we make that, take a little bit off that conflict? Well, cut the front, make the ball go lateral best you can, and then just got to coach him up to hold, and best he can to hold that window, and then come downhill and make the play on the counter.
Middle Tennessee did a great job of shutting down the run, but they were doing some great things secondary-wise. A big part of what you saw was the 3 deep, 2 under fire zones and getting some pressure there. So what things did you see that worked really well from a strategic standpoint?
Well, the first play of the game, Miami gets in the double squeeze sets. A lot of people see that now. I know it's a major formation in pro football, and everybody is running it. They got you get mesh off of it, you can get smash off of it. But the quick game, the double out cuts, right? You got 2x2, everything's squeezed down tight. I just call it squeeze set. Everything is real tight, and then just both the receivers go out cuts. A lot of people play cloud to this. For split safety defense, you typically one option you have is to cloud both sides and carry, and that's good. If you get a scissors combination off of it, cloud is typically going to be really good. The corner can hinge out, inside backer, the nickel can carry two, safety's high, right? They push it through the flat, the corner plays the top down. It's really pretty good for any type of double verts out of it. But the double out cut has always been a little bit stressful because let's say you run into the boundary, the will linebacker, he's trying to take that guy. He's trying to sit on that guy going vertical so he don't get beat, but then he's got to match him out, right? So when you get that quick out route or quick stick route, tough. So what they did on the first play of the game was they looked like they were in cloud to the boundary, and then the corner let one go, and he came back almost like he was in a trap corner where he played between 1 and 2, not outside of 1, and he picked the ball off. So I thought that was a good change up. I thought about things like that in the past. I don't know that I've ever actually got it in or got it coached up well enough, but and maybe they did. Maybe the corner just had an instinctual play, but either way, it's something I'm going to look at in the future against that when we're in split safety and we're going to cloud it. People running the double quick outs, there's a good chance, you're going to want to get to be able to trap it where maybe you slide out a little bit as one goes to flat, but then you fall back inside and, sit on the outcut of two because it is a tough deal when you're in cloud there. So I thought that was really good. However it happened, it was awesome. And then you mentioned the fire zone. Yeah, they were in a good bit of the 3 deep, 2 under fire zone. Blitzing, bringing the inside backers a lot, using the safeties to come down. I call those two guys, they're just seam players, that I've never coached extensively within that system. So I've watched a lot of it though, and I've had a lot of intrigue about it. I just never really coached it. So those two seam players that sit there, they play off the eyes of the quarterback. I thought it looked like it was a little confusing for Miami's offense. Typically what you see routes designed to get the ball in the flat quickly, push the corner vertical, and then get the ball in the flat quickly, and then try to, just rally to the sticks before those seam players can break on the ball. But, it didn't seem like they had enough of that stuff dialed up that it was really going to beat it because the ball at times was still trying to go to the middle of the field, which is the one place the ball I don't think can go when you're in that coverage. I think you should try to be getting it to the sideline the best you can and getting somebody to push getting somebody vertical to push the corner out of there. So that was good. And, you get sacks off of it when they're trying to see what's open in the middle of the field and nothing is, and, you're bringing 6 or they got home a lot. They sacked them a decent amount on it and pressured them just about every time they ran it. And they ran in the run game a little bit too, but it was most evident on third down. But great pressure and just their ability to get Miami to second guess and not be real sure on third down and not be sure where to go with the ball and really ended up, doing a really nice job on third and medium, third and long with that.
Absolutely. Well, tip of the cap to Scott Schaefer and his defensive staff at Middle Tennessee. Certainly a great performance there and a great win for that program. Flipping some things to the situational side. And it's one we've seen come up, I think, again and again here in the early part of the 2022 season. One memorable one is App State and their miracle Hail Mary. But we see a lot of games coming down to that 2 minutes, right? That last drive. And so both of those things, the 2-minute drive and that particular last play, the Hail Mary, is what we're going to focus on today and looking at some things situationally. So what do you have for us there, Dan?
The critical situations that come up in football games are going to be the things as you get down the stretch in your season and you're in, trying to fight for conference championships and fight for playoff positioning, whether you're high school, whether you're a college. There's going to be a game or two you're going to look back at the end of the year and say that these critical situations, we really needed to practice this more, or do this better, or whatever. I can remember being at the University of Houston in 2017, and we, at the end of the season, we had played a total of 12 games that year with the bowl game. One of our regular season games was canceled, but I think it was 9 of our games were decided by a score or less. So when that happens, you're always looking at, these fourth quarter situations that are so critical to the game. So one thing we started doing was building a library of all these situations for all the offensive coordinators that we would play the next year. You start that basically as soon as the summer goes. Now, I understand everybody's got different access to film and a different amount of help. It's certainly a task. But, when you have the help, when you have the access to film, and when you can get it done, I think it's really important. But all the little situations that you come up in, just to be able to say, all right, here's the 12 offensive coordinators we're going to play against, and I want a library for each one for all these little things. And so for 2 minute, the thing about 2 minute is a lot of times we practice it so much in fall camp, and you have 3 or 4 shots of it in fall camp, maybe more, sometimes more. Some operations will hit it on Sunday night, you have your little Sunday night practice in college and Sunday afternoon practice, and you'll go through the mechanics of it versus your offense. And that's kind of what you'll do. But I think it's really important to show it to the players during the week, to at the very least, on a Friday, if you're on a Saturday game schedule, you walk through or jog through the routes and kind of what you intend to call, and make an emphasis to the players, because there's so many little tips, protecting the sideline, right? Laying on the pile as long as you can, not to get a delay of game, but just making sure you don't jump off the guy after you tackle him, that kind of thing. Like all those things that you do to kill time. If you're expecting the work you put in August to be enough in October, I think that, you're going to probably not be satisfied with the results. So, coaching 2 minute every week and just making sure that you're putting an emphasis, and there's a lot of situations I think are like this that are getting neglected as the season goes on, but making sure you're putting an emphasis on it, especially later in the week. And it doesn't have to be high impact and high speed, but here are the routes. Here's what we'll call against it. And here's how they're going to match up. And, I think from schematically, just making sure you have a couple change ups, making sure you can protect the sideline. But typically, like anything where the corners are clouded and they're the ones protecting the sideline because they already have leverage on the offensive players, and they can keep the guys off the sideline, keep the ball in the middle of the field best you can. The other thing, I think, just whatever your coverage is, what happens a lot where they get the chunk plays is either they get the deep sail routes and your corners can't or won't get enough depth to play under them, or they get the deep in cuts, and it's because the space between your underneath coverage and the depth of your deep coverage is so big. Okay, so you have to just make sure that you're conscious of that and where that stuff can come from. But making sure that you walk through it, practice it, and show it sequentially to the players. Hey, this is the drive, right? And I'm specifically talking about end of half too, because game, because end of half is different to me. So I always break it down EOH and EOG, right? But this is end of game 2 minutes.
I love that idea of building the library because, for one, it's not necessarily year to year, or maybe even by the time you play that team, something that you may see on tape to then. They might not have had that opportunity to do many of those things. So if you're building something on that offensive coordinator, just in the approach, right? The way we approach that situation is we're going to have a package that we run all year. It gets installed, we rep it. We're going to get good at it over the course of the season by not messing with it, keeping it simple, being able to have, our procedures down pat. But that's what you're going to see, right? And as you said, it may change end of game, end of half. I like that you're delineating those as well. But I think that's the way to really start to give your players a feel for this particular week. If we hit this situation, this is what they like to do. This is what you're going to see. Because for the most part, we get out there. It's exactly like you said. We're going to go against our D. They're going to run the packages, things they do, which is probably in some ways similar to the opponent.
Yep.
And same thing from us. You're probably going to see a lot of similar things there. But, I mean, all of that is, there are going to be some differences, right? So I like giving it that context, and I agree that's something that you have to go back through the game film. For high school guys, I know the space is at a premium now because you get charged for it. But I would say, as you're looking at this season, before you wipe out all the opponent film, if you're able to capture on some of that scout film those 2 minute situations, man, archive those, put them in a playlist, archive them, and build that library on that particular team. So So you have that, so you can show it, so you can cover it in a meeting, so you can walk through it in a practice that week and give your guys something more specific to defend rather than going out and working in generalities.
Yeah, I think so many of these things come just from your different experiences, and I hope that coaches just take see their experiences for what they are. And I'll say this because, and I think of this, I think about like 2-point plays. I worked for a lot of different people, but one guy I work for that's an offensive coach, and I want to put this out there for him, but a very creative, great offensive coach that, had principles, but man, he could really, like, with motion, with different things, do a lot of different things with the offense. And we always had good offenses when I worked with him. But when it came time to run 2-point play, he was probably going to go unbalanced, X off, sprint the guy over and sprint out, motion the guy over and sprint out the snag 7. Like clockwork. I mean, like, every time we did a 2-minute drill in spring or in fall camp or spring ball, like, that's what was going to get. It was the first play you were going to get. And so, like, I looked at that, like, as creative as you might be and as multiple as you might be on offense or defense, in a lot of these critical situations, you're not going to be nearly as creative. So I could go back and find your 2-point plays, a library of them, and let's say I can find 5 of them on you. If we line up in 2-point tomorrow, you're probably going to call one of those 5. So I think that, like, there's going to be a lot less multiplicity in these critical situations because, for the sake of talking about, you don't practice. Nobody practices. I won't say nobody. Nobody I've ever experienced practices 2-minute on like a Tuesday or Wednesday. Like, that's when you're practicing all the things that have multiplicity to them, right? Your auto blitzes, your combo coverages. Hey, we're going to play quarters this week. We're not going to play it how we've always played it. We're going to play it this way. And then that 2-minute becomes, all right, we got our way to play 2-man. We got our way to play our version of Tampa, and then we got a way to blitz them. Right? And it's probably going to be pretty consistent throughout the season and throughout your career as a coordinator and as a staff. So I think that, using the library, you can get this stuff. Like, if I pull up a 2-minute drill because I don't have one from this year, I pull one up from last year, it's probably going to be very similar. The routes are going to be similar. So I think that's extremely important. And, it's just those critical situations. Like, I think the worst feeling you can have as a coach is being in one of those situations and feeling like you didn't prepare the players for it. So I think it's just so important to coach it throughout the week. Another thing I do is, for a lot of these situations, is I'll bring a book out on the sideline that has the drives that the offense ran in 2-minute carded. So if we're playing somebody and they ran 2-minute drives this year, I'll have the book out there and all the routes will be carded in the book. And that way, I've been through the situation so many times where you're sitting there on the sideline. Hey, we might be going back for a 2-minute drive. Get these guys ready. Talk to them about our calls and the routes they ran. Oh, yeah, great idea. Everybody gets down there and say, hey, you remember that second down route they ran 2 weeks ago? Well, yeah, I thought number 1 was on the dig. No. Number 1 went vertical. 2 was the dig. And then, you're just having this conversation headset. So bring the cards out, card up the 2-minute drill, bring it out. And then when you're saying, hey, it might be 2-minute drill, go grab the situational book. Bang, here they go. Guys, last week they had 2-minute situation. First thing they started with was draw. This is what it looked like. This was the formation. Next one they started with, they ran pin route, right? Bang. So, you just have that stuff with you on the sideline, so there's never any confusion. Because, again, when you think you're going to go back for a 2-minute, offense typically has the ball, right? Sometimes it's a longer drive. Hey, if we score here, right, you got to be ready for 2 minutes, right? So to take the guys through that and have some information on the sideline that you don't have to try to jog your memory or go back to your call sheet and see all that stuff, I think is very helpful, especially to the assistants and stuff that, might be taking their players through that.
Yeah, incredibly important points there. One being the critical situations. I totally agree. In those, because of the lack of frequency, we do tend to game plan and put in a package that we will rep all year. I think you can go to the 2-point plays. I think in a lot of times it's coming out, right? From the shadow of your own goalpost, guys are going to do the same things. But the point going back to it is to build that library on those guys. It may not all happen in this 1 year, or what you're getting a picture of this 1 year might not be able to tell the story. This is what these guys do in this situation. So looking at all of those rare things and starting to build that library, thinking about it, when this season ends, hey, before we, if you have to get rid of film space because of whatever system you use, before you flush that, being able to grab some of those and set them aside and build those tapes to go back to later. And then I love the idea of just having that resource, that teaching tool out there on the sideline so you can refer to it real quick, because you never have a lot of time to go over those things. It's not always clear. You give them a visual. I think that approach is perfect, and it's something, again, to look at in these different situations. How could we apply what Coach Carroll just shared with us here and this idea to some other things as well? And I think it sets your defense up for success, or at least gives you a better chance for success in those situations. That takes us to another play that is rare. We may see it just a handful of times in a season, but the Hail Mary, right? The last play of the game, Hail Mary. And we'll talk about some other ones over the course of the season here, but today we're going to focus on the Hail Mary and defending it.
I think that typically most people are kind of in a similar structure. They're in like a three-man, right? Everybody matches up underneath. You got three-man front, a backer that's attached to the back. Everybody's got a little stunt that they like to run to keep the quarterback in the pocket. Jam carry, box out when you get to the ball. Yeah, I think that the tip for the ball guy, so we would put our best ball defender in the middle of the field. And when you went 3-by-1, we'd cheat him over. If you stayed in like a 2-by-2, we would leave him in the middle, and then he would just kind of play off of where the ball was going to go. But, the tip we always said is, if you can bat it down. If you can't get the leverage to bat it down, you have to catch it, right? Don't ever tip it up. Okay, so bat it down or catch it, right? Those would be some of the important parts. And then, like, if they get in 3-by-1, which most people do, I think the critical thing is the important one to stress and practice is the 3-by-1 sprint out and launching. And then the other guy, so the backside safety, the other 3-deep guy, he runs the goal line as the corner on the X boxes out. He runs the goal line. The middle safety becomes the ball guy, and then everybody else, the front side safety gets behind the cluster, and then everybody else boxes out. And we try to keep him away from the ball guy so he can get the ball on the ground or catch it if it's going over his head. But so that's just a brief about that part. But it goes back to the same things. Like, I want a clip of the Hail Mary that this offensive coordinators ran. And again, it comes back to an experience, right? And this is a different coordinator I'm talking about. We worked with them. And then by the time we get to the part of camp that they do this, we said, what you guys Hail Mary look like, just so we got an idea before we got to practice. They said, we go 4-man bunch into the boundary and sprint to it. All right. I've never seen that before. So we had to come up and just teach, okay, it's going to be empty. So now we got to make a little adjustment, because typically they're using the back to seal the edge so they can get the quarterback out. Now the mic's got to get out there, and we got to teach this bunch, right? So if that would have happened in a game, I can guarantee you we would have turned somebody loose, because we never talked about that. I've never seen anybody go 4-by diamond into the boundary bunch and then, short roll, the best they can get out, because they don't have anybody to chip the end now. But if they did, they would, if they got the end hooked, he would keep going. If not, he'd short roll, and then he has a shot to throw the backside X, or he can, throw out of that 4-by-1, that diamond cluster out there. So, we had to create new rules for that. So I thought I was like, look, we always have to have a clip of these guys throwing Hail Mary. And now they might do something different, but in the game, that's fine. But we have to have a clip, and we have to walk through it. I do not want to lose on a Hail Mary. I do not want to be unprepared to play a Hail Mary. And the other thing about that is you start putting guys on those teams, those Hail Mary teams, like maybe an offensive player is your ball guy, whatever, like just making sure you have those substitutions right throughout the game as guys get hurt, because that stuff comes up on you quick. You end up in that situation way faster than you think. And if you're not prepared for it and you lose on a Hail Mary, probably not going to be much worse feeling than being unprepared for a situation like that. So whatever the offense might do, whatever that coordinator's done in the past, but I'm going to find the clip, because, he might be a game 7. He probably hasn't thrown a Hail Mary. The majority of teams haven't thrown one. So find what clip from some time in that guy's career and practice that, walk through it, and let your players at least know, hey, we're going to be ready for this situation. This is what they've done. He's done in the past. This is what we got. If they come out and something else, this is how we would adjust to it. If it's really funky, I hope we got a timeout to fire. But I think it's important, as you do practice Hail Mary, that, you get the guys matched up. You don't let them trick you into something. You have your rules and your principles. It shouldn't be very hard. I think everybody pretty much understands that. But find that clip and make sure you know what you're getting into.
Great stuff there, Coach. And a reminder that there's a lot here. And so check our show notes for the details and some of these bullet points that we're talking about. I think there's a lot here you can, even if you don't have the time right now, set it aside and work on that stuff for later. But a lot of great tips there on preparing your teams for the different situations. And that takes us to the last part of the show today. And we're going to look at our weekly option tips. This one going back to a 3-4 structure.
Yeah, East Carolina, they played 3-4 against Navy. It was a really hard-fought game, fun game to watch. A couple points I would say, they played a little bit of backer force. So they were using the edge guys to take the pitch at times, kind of fit the safety inside. It's a change-up that I've spoke about a lot on here I really like. I think you have to be able to play multiple forces. But one thing I would say is that force players have to be in a force position. I would say a couple of times that, some teams like to pull those 3-4 backers off the ball a little bit because they want to get to different fronts post-snap where they're stunting the 4s to 5s and blitzing guys and things like that, which is a great change up, and it's a great structure to be in. A lot of people have success with the option playing that. But you got to make sure that when it's those guys' times, when you call their number to force the ball and stay outside the arc, that you got to be able to pull the trigger and get outside the arc of the safety. Because here's the other issue, and this is one of those practice issues that comes up: the speed and the width at which the slots will arc to get to the safety. So the slot doesn't know that you're not using the safety as the force player on this particular play. So he's still going to get width quickly, right? He's going to widen really quick to try to, create an alley for the safety. Because what do they want to do? They want to widen the force player as much as possible. They don't mind that you force the pitch. They're cool with that. But if they can make you force it outside the numbers, they got great running lanes, okay? So they get wide to make you match their width, and now it becomes like a fading force situation. Well, if you're head up to them or just slightly outside and they get width really quickly, now you got to run for width, and now just the whole force is just taking itself out of the play. So just make sure that whoever you're forcing it with on that particular play, make sure force players are in force positions where they can pull the trigger downhill and try to get the ball cut off and shorten the alleys for the option to run through. The other one, watching them, they played their front side backers really aggressive to the front side, something that I think is really important to do in a 3-4. Fullback steps at you. We've talked about this before, being able to play fast through that alley. But the backside backer, still responsible for the fullback and the dives on those plays, has to be ready to get cut by the center. I used to run these key drills a lot with just a quarterback, a fullback, and I would stand in as the center, and the two backers work on the string as the fullback takes direction, and then throw a agility bag or a step over at the backside backer's knee, so he got to play the cut every single time. I don't care if we're in a walkthrough. I don't care if it's a walkthrough in the meeting room, whatever, but just backside linebacker flow away. You're going to the fullback, but you've got to play the cut. You've got to be able to punch the helmet of the center, get his face down, and get over top of it. You got to know what's coming. He's going to crawl. Most of the time, he's going to crawl out of there. He's going to shoulder into the nose as the nose lags backside, and he's going to crawl out of there and try to get you any way he can. So backside linebacker flow away, got to be ready to play the cut. And the last thing you notice on the tape, any 3-man surface playing the option, you have to have a plan to play G lead. So whatever they've shown G lead in, whatever formation, I know that the tedious part sometimes of playing the option is getting adjusted to all the formations. And if this guy's eligible and he's not eligible, and we're going to spin our safeties this way, and it can be extremely tedious. There's nobody that's more sympathetic to that than me, but anytime you have a 3-man surface, you've got to be able to play the G lead. And personally, I think that means you want to have a tight 9 technique that can spill the guard as soon as he pulls. If you got a better way or a different way, that's fine. But just no matter what, whether it's a tight end over there, whether it's a tackle over formation that they like to give, we've got to be able to play the G lead the best we can and at least get the ball to stay sideways while we run it down. Because when they can just pull that guard around and guarantee 3+ yards, it can be a long day. So when the fullback's making yards, again, the fullback, can't let the fullback make the yards. You can't let the ball circle the defense. And if you can stop those two things, usually you got a pretty good chance to win. Then it gets into, like I talked about before, the turnovers and the fourth down stops. But, if you let the fullback make the yards, that's something that they can always come back to, and they typically do, and it makes it a difficult day for the defense.
Dan, you presented a ton of great tips today, a ton of great coaching points, suggestions. Again, all of those are outlined and bulleted in our show notes if you want to be able to take a look at these later or put some of those things in your notes. Coach, I really appreciate all the time that you put into this. Another great week of Defense with DC here, and we look forward to continuing this as the season goes along.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Keith. Thanks for having me.